Translanguaging in classrooms. Now let us look at how does translanguaging actually happen in classrooms. So in all bilingual, multilingual contexts, no matter if they are monolingual context, in terms of immersion programs that are monolingual, translanguaging does take place in informal contexts. And when it takes place, it is actually, these are the languaging practices that are happening in the wider socio-cultural context. And these languaging practices are being naturally mapped into the schooling practices also. So more often than not, you might find teachers who try to stop this translanguaging, but one way or the other, it does happen. It also happens no matter how strong those institutional practices are to separate different subjects and allocate different languages to different subjects. So while the students will use those specific languages that have been allocated to different subjects, they will translanguage when it comes to informal contexts. When they are talking about, for instance, about other things at playtime, when they are sitting eating at cafeteria or at home time, they will be translanguaging no matter what we do. So separation of subjects per subject does not really affect it. And let's look at this specific example of a kindergarten classroom in the US. Now, this is a bilingual education program, and institutionally, the languages have been divided strictly. So different subjects are given different languages, and so much so that the kindergarten students have to actually move to different classrooms when they are studying specific subjects. And the teachers are also different. So in this case, this is Spanish and English. So they have a different teacher for Spanish who teaches them in a different class, and then they have a different teacher for English language, which teaches English language text in some other class. So the children are actually leaving classroom and moving on to other classrooms to study those subjects in those languages. At times, they also regroup students. So the students who have English as their first language are given a different type of instruction in Spanish content. And similarly, the Spanish students who have Spanish as their first language and English as their second language are given additional support to learn English language content. So we can see that there's lots of grouping and regrouping in terms of this effort to keep the two languages separate. So what happens that despite this, there is translanguaging in other spaces? But the interesting thing is that if we try to understand the consequences of these translanguaging, and actually the process that it leads to is a process that we might call as scaffolding. Now, scaffolding is a structure that you sort of support a building when you are making it. It's a very important construct in sociocultural theory of learning. And this means that translanguaging actually helps the learners to learn the language and the content itself. Now, if we look at this transcript in this scenario where this conversation takes place, there are two students and a teacher. So the student B is more proficient bilingual in both languages rather than A, who is a Spanish child and who is only learning English now. So what this child A, who is Spanish, what he does is he looks out the window, and in Spanish, he talking to himself, he says, "It's raining a lot." And then to draw the attention of the other child, he points out the window, towards the window, and says, "Look, it's washing. There's washing a fura outside." Now, this girl who is more proficient in both Spanish and English asks him in Spanish what he was saying, and then turning to the teacher, she tells the teacher, he says raining. He speaks Spanish, only Spanish. And then she turns to the boy and tells it's not washing, but it is raining. So without the intervention of the teacher, one child helps the other child to learn the vocabulary in terms of raining. Not only that, this child who is more proficient bilingual than the other child also acts as a conduit between the teacher and the child, explaining what the student is saying to the teacher. So we can see how these are all supporting structures that are happening or constructed through translanguaging.